Hello and welcome to White Feather Investment Multifamily Finance Module. My name is Julianne Peterson. I'm with Old Capital Lending, and I am here today to bring you a little bit of information about syndication. I know that many of you are looking at single family, and it's great. It's a great asset class. But I thought it might be helpful for you to get another sense of a person, Greg Butcher, who is with Blue Sky Equity, who's doing syndication. And I think our time together will be super important for you and very valuable. So let's welcome Greg Butcher. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Julie. Thanks so much for having me today.
Absolutely. You know, you have been in multifamily syndication for a while now. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got yourself to multifamily? What was your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started off, my career was as a Marine Corps officer. So I know that a lot of Buddy's group is still military or military veterans. So I fall in that same category. In fact, I served off and on in the same community with Buddy during our time in uniform, combat engineer officers. So I retired in 2015. While I was still active duty, about 18 years ago, my first time living in California, I was in Bakersfield, and someone handed me this little purple and gray book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that opened my eyes, as it did this for so many other people all over this country. Probably several people who are going to be listening to this module, actually. So that got me thinking big thoughts. I had just bought my first house. I had always just been a renter before, and I really didn't know anything about it. I just knew that I didn't want to keep throwing my money away in rent. So I bought my first house, not knowing if I could afford it. Thank God for the VA loan, I did. And also thank God for the timing, because I bought that house in Bakersfield for about $92,000 in 2002. I sold it when I moved out of there in 2005. And if anyone knows what California real estate did during those years, it skyrocketed. I sold that house 3 years later for $229,000. And I thought, hey, this real estate thing is something great. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad through that time while I owned the house. I was like, there's something to this. I got to chase after this. I want to learn more. And sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, or lucky than smart.
True. Yes.
Then after that, I took some of those proceeds and bought my next house, because my next plan was to, whenever I made a move in the Marine Corps, to buy a house there, live in it, and then when I left, to rent it out to tenants, keep it as a renter. So I moved.
Great strategy. Great strategy.
Thank you. So yeah, so I moved to Fredericksburg, Virginia next, and I put a lot of those proceeds into buying a house there. Turns out there's this thing called a market cycle. I didn't know anything about it. So I bought at the peak of the market. And so a few years later, bad things happened. You know, I lived there for a year while I was in school, and then I moved down to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and I bought a house in Sneads Ferry, North Carolina, and I bought that at the top of the market also. So needless to say, a couple of years later, both of those homes were underwater. I had tenants, they were rented out.
So, you know, a great example here of not all great things come in real estate, right? It's volatile. It can be. So yeah, great point.
So I call those my learning properties. But yeah. So fast forward a few years, I went to Germany for a couple of years, put all the real estate stuff on hold while I was there, moved back to Carlsbad, California, stationed at Camp Pendleton and then at Miramar, and decided I was going to try to get back into it. And after I got back from I tried getting into an out-of-state flip because I didn't like the price of Southern California real estate. Did that with some people from San Diego who claimed to really know the market in Indianapolis, Indiana. Ended up being a bad deal, lost about 10 grand on it. And I was like, how do we do this out of state? How can we actually make this work, and how can I make single family investing scalable? So then a couple of years later, after going to Afghanistan and moving out near 29 Palms, I happened to go to the Anaheim REI Expo in 2013. And I was invited there. Me and my now ex-girlfriend were there together with Kimberly Rushing while Buddy was deployed. And
wow, that's interesting.
And while I was there, I heard this guy talking about multifamily and investing in apartments, and a light bulb clicked on in my head. And I'd always thought that the people who owned apartments were either really rich or were big corporations and stuff. I had no idea that ordinary people like me could do this. And turns out we can. So
amazing. Amazing. This whole syndication model really allows people like you and I, who are not oil and gas experts, right? Who are just flowing with capital. It really allows normal people, if you want to call us normal, to get into this model. So, I mean, terrific opportunities that you took advantage of, right? So can you tell us a little bit about how you got from the idea of multifamily into getting into your first deal?
Sure. So I joined a multifamily educational and networking organization. And to me, that was one of the best things that I did, because that gave me the education about the space and about the industry to really understand how to get started. And after having been doing single family homes like so many other people, when I thought of multifamily, I was thinking, okay, 4 units, 10 quadplex, 10 units, 20 units, maybe. I mean, how big can I really do this? And then I learned through that education and networking process that, you know, about syndications, and that word syndication scares people, but all it is a group of people who are like-minded, who pool their money together to buy something together. You know, that's really all it is. So found a bunch of other people who wanted to invest in apartments together, and someone puts the deal together and runs it for everyone, and they get a little bigger piece of the pie for doing all that extra work. And then everybody wins together or loses together. Usually it's winning together.
So what was the time frame from the minute you decided and got into this educational program to the time you got into your first deal? What was the time frame there? How much time went by?
When I first decided that, yes, this is for me, within about 3 or 4 months, I invested as a limited partner or a passive investor, means the same thing, in someone else's deal. And within that first year, I just focused on going through the education modules that I had to go through, and I invested in a few deals passively. And I tried to learn as much as I could from those lead sponsors or syndicators who would put the deals together, about how they worked. And I asked a lot of questions. And just to kind of point out how important, I always talk to new investors who are saying, I'm going to be a syndicator. I say, step back and really take into it the idea that, hey, I'm going to invest in someone else's deal, because it really gives you a sense of what kind of communication, what kind of involvement these guys who are syndicating, what they go through, how they sell their deal, how they find investors, what they're communicating if something goes wrong. It's critically important that you understand this before you get into your as a GP or a KP on a deal. So keep going. Now, the question I have here is, you got in as an LP, you invested some capital, 50, 100, 150, right? Something that was doable, right? Yeah, and the deals were smaller back then, and the deals I got into were in Texas and Oklahoma, so it was possible to find deals for like $30,000 and $40,000 a door. Which, you know, at least in the markets I'm looking in right now, you certainly can't do that. So the amount we could invest with smaller amounts then. So I invested, I think, $30,000 in one deal and $25,000 in another deal, and then I invested my self-directed IRA, which is another great way to invest, which was about $70,000 into a deal.
So that's fabulous. Now that IRA, and we can go down that road when we talk to take that module for using your money in other ways, but you can only use your money like that on other people's deals. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, you can't invest those IRA or retirement funds in your own deal.
Yeah, so keep that in mind. Really important. So you invested this capital. I'm just curious. Have you gone full cycle? Have you seen that $30,000 or your $70,000? Be returned to you, and what was the time frame that took place?
I have. So all the deals have gotten into the projected holding period, which is, you know, just the amount of time we think we're going to own and operate the property before sale, was projected to be 5 years. The 2 of the 3 deals that I got into passively during that first year have gone full cycle. in roughly about the 2 to 3 year time frame. My first deal that I did as a sponsor, which was maybe about a year and a half after getting into that program and making that decision to get started, that went full cycle in 28 months, so just under 2.5 years.
So I'm curious, let's talk about as an LP, you put in 70,000, you went full cycle, you say in 36 months, right? It was projected at 5 years.
Yeah,
we see a lot of this, right? We were projecting out far, but we're actually returning pretty quickly, you know, in the past, right? Things have changed a little bit over time with COVID. But what I would want to question you, and I'm looking for your answer on your 70,000, what did it end up being after 3 years?
So the 70,000 is in the deal that I still have going right now. So let me switch to another one. I call the deals I got into passively, I call them affectionately the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good one is the one that's still going, the 70,000. Okay, so this all cards on the table here, because all deals aren't created equal, and you have a pro forma, but that doesn't mean it's going to operate according to your pro forma. You know, you do the best that you can. And education gets you a long way towards understanding what the factors that will actually affect that. So the 30,000 deal, that was in a property in Oklahoma City, a little bit of a tougher submarket. It ended up returning about 60% total return in about 2.5 years. So that got me to about 45, 50,000 right in that neighborhood. So
fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
The ugly, which I still didn't lose money, I'll be honest, you know, and if you want to talk more about that later, we can, but that one made 15, 17% return, and I got a lot of great lessons about it. So I can't think about what just the monetary return was on it without thinking about all the great lessons that I learned from that deal.
Terrific. And you know what, let's talk a little bit about, again, going back to limited partner, what's really critical is that you are in a deal. You're passively investing in that deal, but you're working with a syndicator that will sit down and answer your questions.
Absolutely.
It's not, I mean, yeah, we all want to double our money, and you can put it out with a great syndicator. But the question I have for you is, are you going to learn from that guy? Or are you just going to, you know, bring in checks? I think that first LP position is critical, as Greg mentioned, to be able to walk away with more knowledge. You know, some of these education programs are as high as 50, 60,000, and you could just simply put that into somebody's deal, and you could understand what these guys are teaching. So keep that in mind. LP is a great position. Do not say I'm not doing that, because I think you're cutting yourself short. All right, so Greg, yeah, so now you're in one of your own. I'm sure you've got several that are you're in on your own, correct? As the GP, correct?
Right now, I have one I'm in on my own as a GP. I have the other one had gone full cycle, and hopefully real soon I'll be in one or two more as a GP. Excellent.
So as a GP, you're going to be asked several questions. One of the things that, Greg, now you're in a great position is that you can become a GP on someone else's deal, in that you have experience with agency debt. This is a critical piece when we're talking about financing. You have to have a sponsor. So Greg, let's just say we have an investor that's listening today, that is interested in having a sponsor. Is that something that you would work towards and help somebody become a sponsor on their deal?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've done that in the past. I've done that on my last deal. That's how I got my start, was someone who was who had done it before, willing to bring me along. And that's how I did it on my last deal, bringing along a couple general partners and a couple KPs who we really didn't necessarily need, but so they would be on the loan also and get that Fannie Mae non-recourse experience.
It's a great thing to work towards. So not only can you get into your own deal as a GP, you can be an LP, but you can also be a KP on somebody's deal where you're helping them. I mean, it's a fabulous way. You know, somebody had to help you, Greg, right, to get into your first deals,
Yes.
and now you're giving back. Just a terrific, good, feel good kind of feeling to help people, others that want to get into this industry. So
Yeah, and just real quick, if I may, Julie.
Yep.
So that first deal we bought for $8 million that I was a GP on, and so we took out about roughly a little over $6 million loan. I can't qualify for a $6 million loan on my own. I need help for that, and that's where key principals or KPs came in, that basically aren't co-sponsors on the deal, but they lend their net worth and liquidity for the deal for the loan application. And maybe they get, especially if they're experienced, they might get a little slice of the pie just for that. And that's how we qualify for the deals.
It's such an effective way to really increase your net worth, right? Because every time you jump into a deal, you're increasing your net worth. So it's a great way to get become a bigger millionaire faster, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm glad. It's a good point. So I'm curious, we're in COVID. We're not always going to be in COVID. We were not in COVID a while ago. How has this changed your underwriting, your focus on multifamily? Do you still believe in the asset, and why? What are the reasons why you continue to stay in multifamily as opposed to mobile home parks, storage, industrial? What is it that keeps you here?
Well, for one thing, it's what I know, but that's not necessarily the best reason to stay in. But that is part of it, is that this is what I know. I don't know those other asset classes very well at all right now. And I'm not at a point where I want to branch out. But more important than that is that multifamily is, from everything I've read and everything I've heard, is doing stronger during this recession than any other commercial real estate asset class out there. I was in a convention online over this past weekend where I heard a couple of big names, Grant Cardone, Robert Kiyosaki, both say the exact same thing. Why? Because people always need a place to live. What's happened during this recession? Okay, people were forced to stay at home. They have to have a home to stay at. They weren't forced to stay in retail shopping spaces. They weren't forced to stay in industrial spaces at work. So some of those businesses had to shut down, but everyone had to have a home to stay in. So there's always going to be a demand for homes.
Great points. Now, what about, you've got investors. So a couple things that I want you to touch on here. What drives your investors to you? And one thing I'm wanting to point out here is when you're talking to an investor, what are you talking about multifamily? Are you talking about how much money they're going to make? Are you going to talk about, let's see, taxes, bonus depreciation? Kind of tell me about that, because I know that there is a ton of liquidity coming out of our foreign investors, as well as out of the great state of California. They're cashing out. And so how do you get them to really look at multifamily? Can you talk to us a little bit about the tax advantages that you speak to about with your LPs?
Sure, absolutely. So when talking to anyone, I really try to do my best. I don't always succeed, but I try to understand their pain points, understand their point of view, and what is it that gives them the most problems in their lives, that they are thinking that multifamily might be an avenue to help overcome those obstacles. Taxes is always way up there. Taxes is always a big one. And so with multifamily, certainly more than single family, it presents the opportunity to really cash in via depreciation. All real estate can be depreciated, and it's a beautiful thing. We all know that. With multifamily, with any kind of larger asset, you have the opportunity to do a cost segregation study, which basically is an engineering study that separates all of the value of the property into certain bins, things like personal property that actually should be depreciated over 5 years instead of over 29 and a half years. This is used in straight line depreciation. Some are 15-year depreciable items. And so the cost segregation study separates everything out into those bins, and it allows you to take more depreciation earlier on in the holding period of the property. And with the Tax Reform Act of 2018, whatever your opinion is of our president, when he passed that, that allowed something for the next few years, which really helps out real estate investors, called bonus depreciation. Bonus depreciation didn't used to be allowed on the sale of existing properties. It was only available on new construction. But now it's available on the purchase of existing properties also. What that means is that anything that is under 20-year depreciable items, it can be depreciated all within the first year. So you get that huge depreciation early on that lowers your taxes and gives you more money to invest. And if you're thinking about the multiple investments over time, the velocity of your money, and being able to generate the most effect as rapidly as possible, that gives you a lot more to play with and to be able to get into more investments faster.
So I want to touch on this because it is available in single family.
Yes.
These cost segregation analyses are available. They're $5,000, $10,000. On a single family, it works and you can do it, but because of the size of these assets that we're talking about, it is huge. So you've got that you're talking about. Now, what about when you go to refinance? This is another critical point where you're not going to be paying taxes on that capital, correct?
So when the property sells, that depreciation has to be recaptured. So you can, like, it can generate a larger tax bill for you when you sell, but there's more to it than that, because you don't pay taxes based on the assets you buy and the assets you sell. You pay taxes on what happens to you in any given tax year. So if I can use my last property as an example, we bought it last year for roughly $16 million. And the cost segregation study came down to the year one depreciation being a little over 5 million. Well, we only raised 4.2 million in equity. Right, so we only raised 4.2 million in equity. So that meant that every one of our investors got more than 100% depreciation based on their investment. So if they invested $100,000, they probably got, I want to say, about 125,000 in depreciation benefits for that they can use on their taxes to lower their taxes. Now, yes, that can get recaptured, but in the year of sale, if you buy more property at the same time, or during that year, then the bonus depreciation that can be taken from the new property can help offset the capital gain that you would have from property that was sold. So similar to a 1031 strategy, it's kind of a buy till you die kind of game.
Now, I know there's one other thing on the tax benefit. 1031 exchanges, big deal. We've got these things are going to be coming up in the election. Currently, 1031s are a great advantage to going to your next property. Now, what I love about the 1031, and you can confirm this, but my understanding is that you put a 1031 onto one of these syndications. Who want to take it is considered a TIC, a tenants in common. So you bolt on your 1031, you become a tenant in common, and then you ride this out. Now now just listen to me. Mm-hmm. Let's say the business plan is a 10-year hold, but we're going to cash you out at 3 years. But I'm going to hold the TIC, your 1031, and the other investors in perpetuity. So let's say at year 3, we cash out the investors. They're going to take all of their 1031 money that they invested. We're going to take it out tax-free, and that 1031 is going to stay with that asset until you sell it. Now that, hopefully you decided to go with a 1031 exchange on something that's being held for a long time. That way you can get your money out tax-free. it's a great way to get around, if you will, or being creative with that 1031, because a lot of times these can be very, very difficult to figure out. Anything to add on that, Greg?
Not on the 1031 side. No, that's a good point. I hadn't even considered. And you're talking about, I'm assuming you're talking about doing a refi at year 3 that would help cash out. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. That's a fantastic strategy.
It's a great strategy. So thinking about your investors, this may be a conversation that you're going to learn and have, right?
Definitely.
So let's bring up one final point here. I think it's final, but let's think about, my question to you is, if you were to go start your business again today, what would you do differently? Would you accelerate? Would you go slower? Being in COVID today, what are your thoughts to encourage other people to get into multifamily and be as successful as you have been?
Real estate always goes up over time. It might go down in the short term, but on a longer term time horizon, it always go up. So waiting around for it to get a little cheaper is not going to have great effects in the long run. In hindsight, if I had to do this over, I would have gone full bore from the very beginning. I was freshly retired from active duty and kind of just enjoying my life at the moment, at the time. I really wish I could go back and just go a lot harder, a lot stronger, and get bigger faster. I wish I'd gotten, I got in at the tail end of the golden era of real estate, but unfortunately I missed out on quite a bit of that I could have participated in. But there's no time like the present. I kept on hearing big names say on this conference I was in this past weekend, if you wait, you're going to regret it. Buy now. It's always a good time to buy real estate. You got to do a little scrutiny, make sure you're buying the right real estate, but it's always a good time. So if you're not in it yet, get in. This is a good time. Absolutely.
Fabulous. Great information. I so appreciate what you have brought to today's conversation. Is there anything that you would say for somebody to take the next steps? What would you like to tell them?
Well, they're welcome to reach out to me. My email, just to throw it out there, Greg at Blue Sky. It's no E in blue. It's just BLUSKY-equity.com. Our website is BLUSKY-equity.com. But really, find some mentors who've done it before. It might be a paid mentorship and education service. It might just be finding someone who can take you under their wing. Going to meetups, listening to podcasts, books. The paid education services can work well, but there's also a lot of free, great resources out there. And find someone who you work well together with, who has the same kind of aspirational goals as you, and put your heads together and see what you can come up with and start working together as you're learning and growing. And maybe you're just making passive investments at first, but then put together a company and get started in this business. I see a lot of people do that, and I got started on my own, and I guess that's one of the things I would have done differently is earlier find someone I worked really well enough with to start a company, because I always say you go farther in teams. So great information. Well, as always, thank you for allowing me, Julie, with Old Capital Lending, to share some of the tidbits and information about multifamily. And as always, you're invited to enjoy some of our content on oldcapitalpodcast.com that can help you look at how other people have gotten involved with multifamily, as well as some of their challenges and some of their, certainly their wins. So I want to thank you for your time, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next module. Have a great day.